The way I look at compassion, I see compassion as something we feel, but also something we do, right? See, I see compassion as something we see in each other that we understand and that we act upon, right? Especially when there is a lack.
You're tuned in to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast, where compassion inspires action. Together, we're building a world centered in understanding, empathy, and courageous action, starting right here in the heart of Southern Nevada. We're taking the principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you to heart. Now, let's welcome a man committed to fostering compassion in every corner of our city, a beacon of compassion in Las Vegas, your host, Will Rucker.
Welcome to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm your host, Will Rucker, and I am absolutely excited for today's episode about cyber hygiene. Yeah, that's right. We are talking about technology and all the stuff I don't really know about, so really interested in learning. And we have an amazing guest. Arun, welcome to the podcast.
Well, yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
What I always start every podcast with is really a level setting question, and it's the same for every guest. And the question is, how do you define compassion? And beyond your definition, I'd love to hear how you came to that definition as well.
Well, the way I look at compassion, I see compassion as something we feel, but also something we do, right? See, I see compassion as something we see in each other that we understand and that we act upon, right? Especially when there is a lack. It's finding the humanity. I think I'm stealing words now. It's finding the humanity in each other, right? Because at the core of all of us, there is just more similarity than difference. But it's acting upon it. See, I think the big difference, or the biggest difference, is a lot of us can feel a lot of empathy and understanding and compassion for each other, for lack of a better term to unify that. But the doers are very few. And the great doers are the ones we respect through human history, right? Whether that is, and strangely enough, we don't need a first and last name for them. We call them Gandhi, and we know who we're talking about. We call them Obama, and we know who we're talking about. Or we call them Mother Teresa, and we know who we're talking about. We don't need a definition for them, or a first and last name, or a title. Those are the great actors who we're all trying to emulate in our own small way, but who began with compassion, with an understanding that there was a need, and then they organized the action. Either it was people or themselves to meet that, right? So I'm a big student of history, and I'm a big student of doing. I don't think I do enough. I wish we could get to that point where we could do as much as many of these great people do and continue to do, some of them. But I think that's the difference between just talking about compassion and being the action that's required to actually meet those needs.
Wow. I mean, we really could leave it right there. And I think our viewers and listening audience would be so enriched by that. So I can't wait to dive deeper. Thank you for sharing that, Arun.
Thank you.
So let's start with a little bit of background about you. So tell us who you are and how you ended up on the podcast today.
Well, look, I spent 20 years as a cognitive behavioral scientist. So I'm a cognitive behavioral scientist who studies how people think and how people do. And I studied that when it came to technology use, right? I did that as a tenured professor, as an academic. I spent a lot of time in the trenches doing primary research. And my research focused on technology and deception, right? How do people get deceived, right? And this is, I'm talking about a day, we've gone back 15 years, 20 years, when people were not thinking about words that we've all come to unfortunately recognize: spear phishing, social engineering, all these AI, these things that we talk about, and now everybody has some understanding of it. I was studying it before these terms were really what we have today. But what I realized, and I've written, lots of papers, I wrote a book quite recently about it, and I continue to do some of that. I'm no longer a professor. But what I realized is that when you're doing work at the primary research level, your audiences are the researchers. To make a difference, to go back to that thing that we call action, I wanted to do something more than just that. I wanted to amount to more than just a person who writes papers and points fingers at problems. So I switched gears and I started writing in the media. So I started reading and advocating. I wrote almost 2-3 dozen articles in CNN, in the Washington Post, major media. And these articles I started writing going back to 2014. I was one of the first guys to write in the media about this concept of cyber hygiene. Wasn't my term, but it was one of the first time in the media that someone wrote about it. This was in 2014. And in 2015, in January, I wrote about ransomware when it was the first ransomware attack. Now, when you say ransomware, everybody knows what we're talking about. Everybody knows. And I wrote about it in CNN. Wrote about AI before anybody else even thought about what AI would do to jobs. Now, moving from primary research to advocacy, I realized advocacy is great, but it still doesn't create that action. Mm-hmm. And so that's what got me to where we are today. But I continue doing all of that, but I started a company called the Cyber Hygiene Academy. And I said, I want to do what I've been asking everybody out there to do, which is focus on kids, focus on cyber hygiene, focus on training them so that no child is ever left behind. Going back to 2015, I wrote about the need to update our education system so children can learn digital security skills and digital safety skills in K through 12. Going back to a CNN article I wrote in late 2014. Almost 10 years later, no one's really done it. And so all the advocacy, I was in the US Senate talking about it. I've talked about it in every forum. I realized at some point, I'm going to now quote Obama, you have to be the action that you want out there. You want to be that solution.
So what initially drew you to cybersecurity or AI or tech in general?
Well, what drew me to it was that I found the ease with which we trusted the technologies. See, strangely enough, we trust technology more than we trust each other, considering that we're less empathetic to technology, right? And so strangely enough, if Google gives you a search result, you trust it more than if someone next to you said, hey, this is the search result. You'd go back on Google to confirm it. And today you'd go on an AI program to do it. That's very dangerous because we never go down that path of saying, could that be wrong? And because we trust it, it's easy to deceive people through it.
So let's take a whole step back. You're absolutely right. People trust their Google results, their Google search. How do you think that trust was fortified? Because I grew up with physical encyclopedias and books, and you trusted it because it had been verified and vetted, and it was written, so you knew it didn't change. Anyone can put anything up on a website now. And if it's online, people kind of have that same connection. But the kids today didn't grow up with encyclopedias. So how did that bridge get built? Where does it come from?
I think there's two reasons why that bridge was created first, right? One reason for it is that technology makes things easy. It's efficient. And as humans, as somebody who studies human psychology and behavior, we are cognitively very lazy. I don't like to use the word lazy, but we tend to be, right? We tend to we tend to do the least. And there's a reason for it. Okay. And in my book, in my recent book called The Weakest Link, I write about it. I have a chapter dedicated to how humans think, right? Our brain occupies and expends a lot of our energy. Every day, all the food that you consume, a lot of it goes to feeding the human brain, which is incredibly energy intensive. And to avoid that, we all take shortcuts. We routinize. And what technology does, it makes things easier. How many people go to page 8 of the Google search results? Most people never do. Unless you really, really need something. If something life-threatening and you got to find a solution and you're going to find that needle in a haystack, you're going to do that. Otherwise, you're going to look at the first page and the first 4 results and you're done. So technology creates that efficiency that feeds your brain in exactly the kind of bite size that it expects or it likes. And so that's your first problem. And now today, AI is going to make it even worse. It's going to tell you the answer, and it's going to sound very friendly doing it. So that's your problem.
So, there's so much in there I'd love to unpack. I'm thinking, I'm probably not going to say this quite the right way, but it's like the TikTokification of our culture.
That's right.
And I I'm concerned because I'm long-winded. I kind of speak in paragraphs instead of sound bites, but I'm working on shortening it. And I wonder if this is I wonder the advantages of it, but also if it's really rewiring us at our very foundations to not think about context and not consider other viewpoints or source information or truth for that matter.
Absolutely. I'm going to reference an article I wrote in CNN, now goes back 5, 6, 8 years ago, where I wrote about what I call, this was when AI was new. I wrote 3 articles on CNN. I'd love to link it in your show notes. One of which dealt with this idea of what would AI do to the news when it starts writing the news for you. And this is exactly coming in line with what you're saying. You create the perfect echo chamber that you live in. So for instance, and I wrote this example in this article, I said, let's say you're looking for, climate politics. You'll get an article that will take everything and encapsulate it and write it from a climate science point of view. Let's say you're a climate denier. It's going to write the same article in a way in which meets you. And now today, as you can see with, OpenAI and stuff, this can happen real time. This can be done at your device. You, over time, may not even realize it's happening. You'll have the same network. Let's say you go to abc.com, whatever network you go to, and the news that you see and the news that I see will be different only in the way it's framed based on your expectations and mine. It's the perfect echo chamber. Everybody always agrees with you. No one disagrees, and you get everything the way you like it. And that's the danger of these technologies. And as we are cognitively lazy, we love to live in a world where we think everybody's supporting our point of view and that our point of view is the only view that dominates. We stop wanting change. We stop wanting people to argue with us. Because no one likes the discomfort. And I wrote exactly about this. And I said, this is the problem. And this is why digital hygiene becomes so important. It's so you don't get lost in the technology. To use your word, TikTokification, right? Where you're drawn into an endless cycle of just watching short clips and you're just gazing at it. But what you're not realizing is as you're doing that, you're picking up these concepts, as all the children out there do, that becomes your reality. Language is changing. I have 2 children, one who's 8 and my daughter's 15. And you can see the language that they use has started to change from the language I used to use. There are words now that parents would know which children are using. Where are they getting it from? They're getting it from social media. They're getting it from all these different venues. And you can see it happening in our culture. And we see it everywhere, right? We see it even in political environments. You're seeing it everywhere.
I'm concerned. And I'm a person that was very fortunate, privileged, blessed to grow up in diverse spaces where people weren't just racially or ethnically diverse, but the way that they thought and approached life was very diverse. I come from a theatrical background and a music background. I even played soccer. So all of these different experiences really shaped my thirst for difference and to examine, well, why might you approach it that way? What about this speaks to you? And I love the X-Men comics, and their X-Men 97 just concluded and watched the whole thing, loved it. But it's really talking about the importance of diversity, of having people with differing perspectives so that we ultimately have a source of universal truth. So I'm wondering, and I want to go to your cyber education piece. How are you imparting this into kids through the lens of cyber hygiene?
Right. So, when we think about cyber hygiene, right, we have to distinguish between the content of cyber hygiene, which is teaching them what to listen to or what media to go to, which is not what we're trying to focus on, and how to do it. So what we want to do with cyber hygiene is we want to teach kids how to be safe, how to assess the news, right? How do you use your device appropriately? How do you use social media in a measured manner? How do you look for cyber bullying? How do you report it? Notice the word is how. Too often, we try to, as a parent, I mean, no one wants you to navigate the why or the specifics of what that content should be. I think when it comes to young children, we want to teach them the how. We want to teach them all the things that you and I, as children, learned. We learned how because we evolved with the technology. We were lucky enough that, I was very lucky to see social media emerge. I was lucky enough to see the iPhone being launched. So I saw these technologies from not being there to being there to evolving into what they are today. Next generation, as you might have pointed out, is not that lucky. We want to go back to the fundamentals and teach them how. And the reason you want to teach them how is because once you can teach them how, you can bring awareness to what it is that it's doing to them. And then we can say, okay, you know what? Here's the kind of content that perhaps you want to avoid, and give them the tools to be able to do that, right? Unfortunately, what we're doing right now, in my view, is we're completely trying to avoid that. So I don't know if you know this, but at least multiple school systems, this week, New York State, the governor of New York wanted to ban smartphones from the entire K through 12 public school system. Florida has already done that. Now, what these things are doing is we're going back to the prohibition era. And whatever happened at prohibition, we know. You stop these technologies, which are part of their everyday life now. What's going to happen? Well, they're going to sneak it in, or they're going to do it behind your back, and it's going to get worse. And then we have no control over it. If we start with the how do you keep yourself safe? And I'm using the word safe to mean, when we talk about digital safety, we're talking about psychological, we're talking about physical, and we're talking about data, right? Protecting your emotions, your sense of well-being, your physical safety, which is, your location on your devices and all that stuff that your devices can spit out, and your data, like your identity and your financial future, all of that. This is what we look at as cyber hygiene. How do you protect that on your devices? How do you ensure that they're not getting compromised? How do you report to the right people when things are going wrong? How do you know these things are going wrong? That's our first emphasis. Once we can get to that as a society, and this is very important because these are children who are learning it by themselves right now. Because the school system is banning them out, which means where are they learning it? Learning it from other kids who know just as much, if not worse, than it's the blind leading the proverbial blind. It's the worst position to be in. In my view, what we want to do is we want to be permissive. We want to be more permissive, not prohibitive, right? We have to be permissive and give it to them and teach them the how. Teach them the skills that you have when you go online and you do a search and you say, you know what, this isn't enough for me. I want to get another perspective. How do I find that other perspective? Tomorrow's AI-dominated world, they're going to have to navigate that technology to get there. And that's what we hope to do. So we want to build tomorrow's America, right? Tomorrow's children, tomorrow's leaders, to not come out of this world where they're only looking at one perspective and they don't understand the technology at all, to using the technology appropriately and safely.
Mm-hmm. So why, and I probably should have started with this earlier, why cyber hygiene as a term?
Great question, right? So we use the term cyber hygiene because we think about it very similarly to the kind of rituals that we use to protect our personal well-being, right? In the turn of the last century, brushing teeth, washing hands, these were not things we all did. We had to be taught these things. Children in school learned this. Think of something like driver's ed. I don't know if you knew this, but seatbelts were not something people wore up until the 1960s, actually. Right? Even though seatbelts emerged, after the Second World War around the 1930s and 40s with crash test dummies, the use of seatbelts don't start until school systems all over the country started teaching driver safety. And then the kids went home and told the parents, hey, we got to be wearing seatbelts. And it worked from the bottom up. And so cyber hygiene is that idea that we can ritualize technology safety during formative years. And we can make it go up the system where parents are safer too.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's disarming in a sense, because when you think of hygiene, it is something that is routine and that you have very limited defense against. No one's like, oh, I don't want to be hygienic. It's kind of
look, attacks are evolving by the day. And there's something very unique about technology, right? So I've written about this in the past. And look, the human body develops defenses. We have immunity. You could wash your hands, and sometimes you could not, and you would still probably get away without getting sick. Why? Because, your body is built with a lot of defenses. It evolves, it learns, right? Once you get COVID, for instance, you get some immunity to it. Computers don't get immunity after an attack. They remain just as dummy circuits that they were before the attack. The only defense for technology is you. For your phone, it's you. If you make a mistake, that phone gets compromised. If you make the same mistake again, the phone will get compromised again. So as we depend more on technology, it's our job to protect it. One attack can have multiple ramifications. Look at a couple of those attacks that happened in Las Vegas in the Clark County school system. You have an attack, I think last year or the year before, where some kid got compromised because he or she put out her password or one of her credentials out on TikTok. The bad guy gets into her system, and through her system gets into the entire school system's Google workspace. You notice how one compromise and everybody's compromised. 200,000 kids' personal data was exfiltrated and presented online. That is crazy. That's an avoidable problem. Why? Because somebody just didn't have basic hygiene. This person did not know any better. They'd used their school account to create a email account, and the password was their student number. And the student number, ID number, they'd put up on TikTok. Such an avoidable series of events.
Yeah.
And so these are huge issues because once the kids are compromised, the parents can get compromised. Parents were getting emails from other kids' email accounts by the bad guys. And so we can protect this system by creating better hygiene across the board. And that's what we need to do. We have to do it. We don't have a choice because with AI, the attacks are going to get more sophisticated. They're not going away. There is a bad guy out there already using AI. In fact, we have a couple of papers in Black Hat where we showed how AI could be used to create better social engineering attacks. It's very easy to do it. You use publicly available data and it'll spit out a great email. So our job as compassionate leaders is to ensure that that next generation is equipped and that there's no child who doesn't have the technical skills to be able and doesn't get their data compromised very early in life. So they can't do anything. They can't get the kind of jobs they want to get because there's some data about them that's available online. We can prevent that. We have to.
Now, Arun, you've given us a lot to think about, and I want to get to something you have coming up, which I think is really important, and I urge everybody to participate in, and I'll share what that is in just a moment. But I want to know something. Is this really you, or is this your digital twin?
That's a great question. One would never know, right? I mean, the digital twin thing is getting pretty good. I think, on the plus side of technology, we have eternal life. There are people out there, and I love this line of work that I'm looking at where, they're creating clones of people on AI so that it has all the communicative characteristics that you would deploy or you would demonstrate as a digital twin. But, when we all pass, our families would be able to experience us. It's the gift of eternal life. Wow. Think about it, right? So there is a plus side to all of this. But of course, there is the negative side to all of it, which is deception, hackers, and the bad guys out there. I'm a technological optimist. I believe that technology is good in so many levels as a society. But there's always going to be bad actors who are going to try to take advantage of it, try to disrupt, try to monetize, try to destroy. Right? And it's our job to act, to ensure that that next generation is not compromised before they can even step out into that real world. And I see parents, my real evolution in this was when I was seeing parents post videos and pictures of their young kids on social media. And like, that kid's data is already out there. And she or he doesn't even know it yet. And that's a pretty scary proposition.
It is. Now you've got an academy that deals with all of this, and you really empower children, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, teachers and parents as well, with these skills to understand how to navigate the digital world. And you're conducting a survey to really assemble the priorities or gaps maybe that people want to hear about. So could you talk a little bit about the academy and the survey?
That's correct. So I founded a company called the Cyber Hygiene Academy. What we're wanting to do is teach digital safety skills to children and parents and even teachers in age-appropriate manner, right? So if you're in middle school years, we want to do it where we have a program that's going to do it at the middle school level. As you graduate into high school, it's going to be high school oriented. It's going to be more focused. It's going to be much more technical. If you're a parent, it's going to teach you how do you protect your children? How do you protect your family? A lot of parents, I've been talking to parents all over the nation about this. Everybody's asking for a program that will build awareness in the household. How do they protect their kids? How do they protect their devices? When do they give them devices? These are all questions that every parent out there, including me, has faced and will face. And what the Academy does is it gives free education for all of these groups, children, parents, and teachers too, many of whom are also parents. And what we're hoping to do is we have a survey. We're trying to get to see which communities are most in need. And we're targeting different communities with our free program, with our pilot program, based on their need. So we're looking for a community. We know that Las Vegas has gone through multiple ransomware attacks. I know the Clark County School District, I've written about this in Dark Reading. It's gone through its own nightmarish different scenarios over and over and over again. So if there are parents out there, we want to hear from them. We have a survey. We're giving away air tags as gifts to survey respondents who are drawing. We want about 1,000 parents from different communities, from different counties to respond to our survey so we can identify the county most in need and we can offer our coursework to them. And then, it's a pilot program. We would love to hear from the parents about how well their kids are doing or how well they're learning from these programs. It's a free program. The goal here is to be more permissive and not prohibitive. We're hoping to teach them the how so they can protect themselves no matter their age. So that's the goal. And the survey will be available. We're going to, send you a link to it so you can have it in your show notes, Will. I know you have a huge following, so we're looking for 1,000 surveys to be filled out. And we're hoping to find the next community to go and launch our pilot program in.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to hear that, and we definitely will include that in the show notes so everybody listening and watching can go, and if they have kids in that age group, take the survey for you. As we close out, I want to hear just a little bit more kind of about something you alluded to earlier, which is taking the cell phone away versus providing the skills to use it safely. Our school system here in Clark County has already decided they're going to put phones in pouches and that sort of thing. What would you say if you had the ear of the decision maker on that, and how would you approach them with this?
I believe that the kids who have technology earlier in life have better outcomes in life, as long as they know how to use it correctly. As long as the how is taken care of, children benefit from early introduction of technology. Regardless of whether you hide it away from them or put it away from them at school, they're going to use it at home and they're going to use it the wrong way. I believe in being more permissive than prohibitive. Now, there's a good reason for it. Think of the future of these children out there. Today, a person in K through 12, right? Anybody who's in middle school or in kindergarten today, look at the world they're going to be inhabiting when they get out of college. Their first job, and I'm going to give you a little bit of history here, right? Think about organizations, right? 25, 30 years ago, you would get to 40 years ago. You'd go to a company, you would work one company for the rest of your life till you retired. The next generation, my father-in-law's generation that came out, they would have maybe 2 jobs. The generation that came after that, they would have, like more so my generation, we have 2 careers, not just 2 jobs, you have multiple careers. I was an academic, then I was writing in the media. I founded a company. We do multiple careers today. What are these kids going to be in? What's that world? We know that everything is changing. I believe that the future of our children, all of our children, they're going to be working in an ecosystem that's defined by a technology. They're not going to be defining themselves around a company. It'll be an ecosystem built by a technology. which would constantly be evolving. Think of it like, they'd be working for something called an electric car within a company that does it using a certain ecosystem, and then that'll change in maybe 5 years, and then they'll be doing something else. We already see that with companies like Tesla, with companies out there, all technology companies trying to do what used to be done in physical organizations. This is the future. And so what we're doing today is holding back this future because we believe that what we're imparting is more important than that which they're going to spend the rest of their time doing, the rest of their life using. There's a very important reason to give them these technology. It makes them smarter, it makes them sharper, it makes them brighter. Sure, it could be disruptive, but that's where all of us as educators and parents come in. And so I believe we have to be more permissive. I try to, on a different note, I try to play Fortnite with my son, who's 8. He can outstrip me and outplay me because he grew up with it and I didn't. Children who grow up with technology are way better at using technology and doing the things that technology requires them to do. And they're going to be spending their entire life in those ecosystems. So we don't want to be prohibitive. We have to be permissive. That's what I believe we should be doing. And what we do is we do it by teaching them how to do it safely, not by taking it away. That's the easy way. That's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We don't want to do that.
No. Well, Arun, I am so grateful that you joined us for this episode of Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I've learned a ton. Can't wait to dive deeper into your website and clean up my own cyber hygiene as well. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you want to make sure the audience hears today?
I think you're doing a great job. I think we covered it all. You're a terrific host, I got to tell you.
Well, you make it easy because you've got great information and a great way of stating it and great energy as well. So thank you for joining us so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Will. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
This has been Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm your host, Will Rucker. And as I always remind you, you are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. And what you do matters. So live compassionately. See you next time.